And welcome, everybody, to Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is that guy. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And, hey, man, I'm fired up. We were just talking before we started that we haven't, done a normal show in a long time, and it's very strange. To be
Friggin' Brian Kelly messing up our schedule, man. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding.
Yeah. So we're fired up, man, and we've been trying to do this show for like a week and a half, and so I'm really excited to kind of sit down and pick Brian's brain.
The anticipation we've built up for this show is absurd. It's almost like there's no way this show can live up to the anticipation because we were supposed to do it last Tuesday.
Yeah.
And now it's a week later.
Yeah.
But we appreciate y'all's patience.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about Marcus Freeman getting hired because we promised you we were going to talk about who's going to stay or go.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If you can't tell, I'm a little fired up today.
Yeah, well, you've got good reason to be fired up. Yeah. But no, we're gonna have some fun with this. We've got actually a pretty lengthy list of guys to talk about, believe it or not. And so we've broken it down into two categories, right? We've got guys that have NFL decisions, and then guys that have 5th or 6th year decisions,
and who Notre Dame has decisions to make about.
That's very true, because not just because a guy wants to come back doesn't mean Notre Dame either A, has space for him to come back, or B, wants them to come back. Sometimes it's just like, hey, you know what? You've been great for the program. It's been fantastic. It's time for you to, do your next thing. And it's usually understood by the players when that's going to happen. But sometimes those are some tough conversations to have. And unfortunately or fortunately, that is now Marcus Freeman's job. So he gets to have those decisions with those players. But those are decisions that are going to be made here in the next few weeks, to be honest with you. Some after the bowl game, some before the bowl game, etc. But we're going to start off with the two, I would say, biggest names and most obvious. Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams. Both of them clearly have eligibility left. They are true juniors. They are junior in school. They are junior in eligibility as well, because they both played as freshmen. Actually, did Kyron play 4 games as a freshman?
Kyron's a redshirt sophomore.
Okay, so he's a sophomore in eligibility. So he actually has multiple years left.
Well, plus he'd have a COVID year. I mean, if he wanted to stay, he could stay for like 4 more years, but he's not going to. Notre Dame's going to try to convince him to stay for 4 more weeks is where we're at with this one.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing today is, or right now, is will he play in a bowl game? You know what I mean? Like, that's the biggest question.
So let's dive into first. Let's just get it out of the way. Look, everything I'm being told, we all know Kyle Hamilton's gone. Everything I've been told from my sources, Kyron Williams is going to be gone as well, as he should. And this show is going to be mostly about what we think players should do. And when we have some intel, we'll let you know. We have both on these, right? Both on these. And the reality is the way that running backs get drafted, the way that their
longevity in the NFL, like there's only so many years for a running back to capitalize on their talent, right? And you can say it's only so many carries in their legs or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, in the NFL right now, running backs, I don't want to use the word expendable, but you don't see.
Well, they're not valued the same.
Yeah,
way.
That's exactly
it's a
right.
Passing league. It's just a different league, and the reality is it's not a situation where you're going to see a lot of running backs get taken in the top 10. I mean, who was it that drafted? Was it Jacksonville that drafted Leonard Fournette in the top 5 a few years ago, and just never got the value for him because of the type of league it is. Now, there are certain teams like the Titans with what they do with Derrick Henry before his injury. I mean, but that's just not what most teams do. A team like the Rams is not going to have, is not going to take a guy like Kyron Williams in the top 10, right? Now, maybe late first round, early second round. So it's not like he's got to come back to improve his stock. That's point number one. Point number two, we're not even going to talk about Kyle Hamilton because, to be honest with you, he needs to go. He will go. There's no discussion.
Right.
But with Kyron, it's one of those things where I don't know how much he can prove by coming back. I mean, you could say, well, maybe he gets he's a pretty strong guy now, right? He's a pretty physical, strong guy now. Maybe he can do some in the weight room, but nothing he's going to do in the weight room at Notre Dame for next season is going to really impact.
Right.
I mean, he could do that with the NFL as well. So and because he has he's not the biggest guy in the world, and he has a really violent style of play. Like he's not going to back down from anybody. He's just, it's just a lot of wear and tear that you don't necessarily want him to take between now and then. And I just don't see a lot of value. Here's the other part of it too, because if it was just about him as a runner, then I think there could be some merit to him coming back. Right. Because I do think there's aspects of his game as a runner that could continue to be enhanced and maybe the NFL might like more, but not enough to move his draft stock a whole lot. Number two, what's going to jump his draft stock way up is what he does in the passing game.
Exactly.
We just got done saying
what's the NFL right now? It's a passing league.
I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire got drafted in the first round, and I would contend that Kyron Williams is a better player than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because I think Kyron can do everything Clyde Edwards-Helaire can do in the pass game and in pass protection, but I'd say he's a better runner. Yeah, in my opinion. Now, he doesn't have the numbers that Clyde Edwards-Helaire had, but he was part of an all. If Kyron had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Terrace Marshall taking the pressure off him, he probably would have rushed for 1,400 yards as well. So, and things like this aren't a factor in these decisions.
It can't be.
I'm sorry. We're looking at this from a standpoint of, if we were advising these young men, what would we tell them to do? Not if we were Notre Dame coaches, so what would we tell them to do? Because then our stories might be a little bit different.
Well, I think a coach with integrity, though, too, is also going to advise them properly.
I don't disagree with that, but sometimes your emotion can also sometimes blind you to what you actually think is best.
That's fair.
That's why you need outside sources, because you may be able to convince yourself as a coach that he needs to work on this, needs to work on this, and needs to work on this, because what could we do with him next year? That kind of thing.
I'd be putting up major lists about all the things Kyle Hamilton needs to work on. No.
So Kyron, to me, needs to go. And here's another factor that you have to look at too. This has to be looked into. This is not a strong running back class.
Exactly.
It's not. And next year's is probably going to be better, significantly better based on things. I mean, again, I'm not an NFL guy. I'm passing along what I am being told from people that I know.
Right.
And that kind of thing has to factor into this as well. So and that's going to factor into some in Notre Dame's favor. I think it could factor in some other ways in Notre Dame's favor when we get into some other players. But like next year, Bijan Robinson is going to be able to come out next year. The kid from Syracuse that had a monster year this year is going to be able to come out next year. Tank Bigsby is going to be able to come out next year. Deuce Vaughn. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are going to be coming out next year that are going to be very high draft picks. And then when you look at what the perceived top backs in this year's draft class are, a lot of people like to point to Breece Hall. A lot of people like to point to Kenneth Walker. They're both great runners. But if you add up their catches and receiving yards together, they don't equal what Kyron Williams did this year.
Right.
So, it would be a shocker if he came back based on what we're hearing, and that's what he needs to do.
I want to put this up. Big Dustin, thanks for joining us, man. But if Kyron goes, the running back room is dead. Dustin, with all due respect, my guy, you clearly haven't been watching football this year.
And we'll get into we'll get into those shows afterwards, the replace and reload shows. We'll get into those afterwards. They'll be fine at running back. Again, would they be better with Kyron?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. But they'll be fine. But that's not the point of this show, right?
No, I'm just saying.
The show is to focus on who should stay or who should go.
And Kyron isn't making a decision based on what the running back room is going to look like next year.
He shouldn't. But I'll tell you something right now. Knowing Kyron Williams, I guarantee you it's something he's thought about. I guarantee you, because he is a legitimate captain. He is a leader of this football team. He is a team-first kid.
From that point of view, they're gonna miss him.
Right. What I was going to say is from that point, I guarantee he looked at, okay, what's behind me? If they didn't have Logan Diggs and Audric Estime, or, let's say Chris Tyree was I guarantee you that would have made his decision harder. But I think in the end, he's got to do what he's got to do. But I think the fact that they do have Logan Diggs, and as of right now, he's not leaving. They do have Chris Tyree. They do have Audric Estime, guys that he knows can ball. They do have Jadarian Price coming in. He's met Jadarian on his official visit. Yeah. He's looking at the running back room and saying, they're going to be all right. They're going to be all right.
Right.
And that's going to be the key. So we expect Kyron Williams to leave. I think he should leave. That's
I don't have any qualms about it. That's right. if I was close to Kyron Williams, that is what I would advise him to do. You know, that mean it just is what it is. We do have a super chat here from Mark. Well, what's up, Mark? Thank you very much. He says, love you guys. Keep kicking ass. That's the plan. That is absolutely the plan I wrote down. So we're good to go with that. I appreciate it, Mark, very much, man. Thanks for
and see, this is what makes our business meeting so challenging, because I try to come up with this list of things we're going to accomplish, and Vince just says things like that. Let's just kick butt and take names.
Let's just go.
Okay, Vince, but how are we going to do that? Doesn't matter. You know, so and it's partially true. That's what's so funny about it. There is a little bit of truth to that conversation.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's great.
So anyway, I think those two guys both have a shot at the first round. I think Kyron's probably most likely round 2. I think for Kyron, his draft status is going to be somewhat impacted by what he does at the combine and the pro.
I think so too.
And look, there's a reason he worked out for NFL teams last year. Remember, he was one of the guys that was there when Ian Book went through his pro day, which I think is a great thing.
It was him and Davis, wasn't it?
Right. It was him and Avery Davis. Now, Avery Davis is a situation we'll get to here in a little bit, but you know, I think that's something too. I think Kyron's always kind of had this in mind, because that's what running backs should do.
Yeah.
So Vince, let's next talk about guys that are on the fence.
Okay.
And there's a lot of defensive linemen.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk and one offensive lineman. I want to start with the offensive lineman, and then we'll just kind of go through. And that is Jarrett Patterson. This is an interesting one. So first, let's start with the intel. Okay.
Okay.
The intel I've heard is for a long time it was he's leaving. There were a lot of reasons for that. I don't really care to get into. They weren't necessarily all draft related. It was, I'm going to go, because coming back is not going to improve my stock for reasons that I think people can understand where I'm going with this one without me saying it. Now, in the last week, I've been told some different things. I've been told that he's now leaning towards coming back. It's not decided. He still has some NFL draft feedback he has to get from people. He is going to be obviously one of the top draft picks. I talked to somebody today. I'm going to tell you exactly what he said to me about Jarrett Patterson. He said he still might go in the top 50 if he comes out. Well, top 50's middle of round 2. That's about where Liam Eichenberg got drafted.
Yeah, that you go.
But I think as more and more scouts dive into his 2021 film, it's going to hurt his draft stock.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't blame Jarrett for that as much as
but it's just
other factors.
It's just a fact right now as we sit here that his senior film or his 2021 film just isn't great. I mean, he definitely had some games where he struggled, and it was not as good of a year this year as it was last year in 20. And that's not even opinion based. That's just facts. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I get it. And I'm not saying who's to blame or anything like that. At least not in this podcast. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to give him pause, I would imagine.
The other factor of it too is there's the third-year starter factor, right? And this is his third year as a starter. So the thought is, okay, I've started 3 years. That's usually when things go.
Yeah.
And you leave. But the difference is I think because of the difference in coaching he received, he may need that 5th year, like Zach Martin did. Because Zach Martin was one of those guys that came back. Zach Martin was one of those few guys that came back for a 4th year as a starter.
Yeah.
You know, Mike McGlinchey was a 3-year starter. Q was a 3-year starter. Stanley was a 3-year starter. Liam Eichenberg was a 3-year starter, right? Robert Hainsey's the only 4-year starter they had. But that's because he started as a freshman, freshman. Nobody else did.
And he was he's a part-time starter, right? I mean, he was, but you know what I mean. But yeah.
Right. I mean, he technically only started 3 games as a freshman, but he rotated every series.
Right.
And then, Aaron Banks was a 2.5-year starter. So he would stay a little bit longer, but I think Jarrett has the kind of body and the game and because of the fact that he wasn't necessarily developed like some of those guys that have gone after 3 years, I do think he needs another year. And I think another year with a better offensive line coach, I'm just going to come out and say it, is something that could have a big impact on his draft stock next year. Because I think Jarrett Patterson, when he's playing well, is a first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
No doubt. Right now, he's probably, based on what I'm being told. Again, this is me just kind of pass along info. He's probably He's probably about where Liam Eichenberg was picked last year, where Aaron Banks, Liam Eichenberg, that's pretty good. I mean, you're still going to make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
But if you're able to jump up 20 spots, 25, 30 spots, you're going to make even more money. And the other part of it too is linemen are not viewed the same way skill players are. Age actually is not something that hurts linemen. It actually helps.
It's the opposite. Yeah, exactly.
Correct.
Age and, time on the field. And it's just because of the position of offensive line, generally those guys are older because they usually redshirt because they got to get bigger and stronger and all of those things. So if you're looking at a 3-year starter, most of the time those guys are 5th years, which means they're 23-ish years old when
Mike McGlinchey was a 3-year starter as a 5th-year guy.
Right, exactly. That 3rd year is usually their 5th year. Usually.
Right. And there's always Liam Eichenberg was that way.
Right.
Kramer was that way. Banks was kind of, like I said, 2.5 because he came in late in 2018, but he would have needed a 5th year to get that extra time. And so, I mean, you're right. I think there's a lot of value and merit to Jarrett coming back. Part of this is going to be who actually is the O-line coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's going to have again, this is just me reading some of the tea leaves based on a couple things I've heard. I have a feeling like he may not make a decision, an official decision until they find out who the new O-line coach is going to be.
Sure.
And that could factor, because I've been told the Senior Bowl really wants him, and once he commits to the Senior Bowl, that's a sign that he's leaving.
Yeah, exactly. The Senior Bowl is a huge opportunity for those guys too, so he's not going to.
Notre Dame offensive linemen have done a great job of that, so he's probably going to want to make a decision sooner rather than later. But I think it's just with the current situation, he's going to need to hear. He's going to need to hear, sort of. Okay, well, what are my options, right? And who is my O-line coach?
Exactly. So, what's the direction of the coaching search? Because I think that's going to be huge. I feel like they're going to have that wrapped up sooner than later. I'm not that I know who it's going to be, but I feel like
they will have a new O-line coach next year.
Things have moved in a direction of the fact that they're looking for an offensive line coach. That's public.
They will have. I'll say this confidently. It's what we put on the message board at Irish Breakdown a couple days ago. They are going to have a new offensive line coach next year.
So they're looking actively, and so that's why I feel like this is going to be taken care of sooner than later. So that we can find out.
And I want to throw this up there too. Tyler Roberts says, Brian, just for O-line coach, if you want them to suck, then yes, I'll take the job, because I would not do a good job. I'm a quarterbacks receivers guy. Okay. But yeah, so obviously that'll be a big topic of conversation here once we get kind of through the bowl game as far as who that's going to be. But yes, I fully anticipate that Jeff Quinn will not be back next year, and the Notre Dame will have a new offensive line coach. Who that is right now, that I'm not sure of. I know that we obviously put something on the message board about Chris Watt and Harry Heastand, but that's not the only path they're looking towards. There's some other coaches. It's going to be with Chris Watt, right? Because that's a name that's out there. It's going to be exactly like the Marcus Freeman hire. You make that hire because you feel he's the best guy for your present and your future.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have another coach that they think could come in and do a better job now and moving forward, they will hire that other coach no matter what Chris Watt's relationship is to Tommy Rees or Notre Dame or anyone else, right?
Right.
It's going to be about getting the right guy. Now, do I think that they may feel Chris Watt is that guy? Yes, they could end up coming to that. So if they end up keeping Watt or bringing Watt back, it'll be because they think he is a star in the making and can do a great job, not because of the personal relationship. I have been assured of that. So that's why they're also doing their due diligence to make sure they're vetting other candidates. That's the latest intel that I was told. So that's why you got to tune in to Irish Breakdown. We're not just going to throw out a bunch of random names to say who we'd like them to have.
Yeah, right.
This is just kind of, we're going to tell you what we hear. Okay.
I want to throw this out there from Patrick Barnes. It's a super chat. There are a few above this that we will get to, of course, but it is, pertinent to what we are talking about at the moment. Is Quinn leaving us, or is Freeman making staff changes? Either way, that's great news. Thanks for another great podcast while I work. No problem.
This is a staff change, Patrick. So
there you go. Yeah. There you go. Okay, so let's jump into a few other guys, Brian. The first guy that I want to bring up.
It's going to be some defensive line talk now.
3 of them in a row. I think the one that's on everybody's mind right now is Isaiah Foskey. He clearly has a decision to make. I'm sure that he is hearing it from both sides at this point. Have you heard anything? And if so, or if not, What do you think he should do at this point?
He's probably the most on the fence guy from what I've been told. He is really torn on staying or going. I think the thing that's going to help Notre Dame in this instance is the retention of the current staff. If they did not keep Marcus Freeman and Mike Elston, I was told there's no chance Foskey comes back. Now, it wasn't said in a manner like, I'm leaving if you don't keep Marcus Freeman.
Right.
It wasn't that. It was just like, if I'm already on the fence anyway, and he's been on the fence for a month.
Right.
If I'm on the fence anyway, I'm definitely not going to stay with a new staff.
Right.
Right. I mean, that was it. So there was no like ultimatum given to Jack Swarbrick, like I'm going pro. I think, okay, well, have fun, go pro. You know what I mean? We're not going to make our decision for 1 year of you. It was not that kind of conversation. This is just kind of where Isaiah has been with the whole thing, from what I'm told. And so there's some, again, on the fence there. I think the thing that's going to help Notre Dame now, first of all, I'm going to give intel, then we'll talk about what we think he should do. And this is going to kind of segue together. The thing that's coming out about Foskey's draft stock is this is an absolutely loaded year for edge rushers. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you've got Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo, Zach Harrison potentially for Ohio State. Now, Zach Harrison
announced today he's coming out.
Well, yesterday he announced that yesterday.
I just saw it today. Yeah,
and Drake Jackson potentially could come out from USC. There's just what's the kid's name from Texas A&M, DeMarvin Leal. It's a really loaded draft class, and there's a lot of guys that just have more years of experience and production than Isaiah Foskey. Isaiah Foskey's been kind of a 1 year, 1 year guy.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, it kind of leads to the notion that there's a lot of people that would like to see him come back. Now, of course, let me rephrase that. There's some teams that would draft late first, early second that would like for him to come, maybe come out, because then they may be able to sneak him. But I think if he wants to be a top 15 NFL draft pick, which there's a lot of people that think he can be that, he has to come back to do that. He's not going to be able to accomplish that. He's not going to be able to accomplish that this year because of just how loaded it is. I mean, if you look at
the volume,
if you look at Mel Kiper's big board, for example, now again, Mel Kiper's not the NFL scouts, right? So I'm just making a point.
It's just an example, yeah.
11 of his, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his top 13 players on his big board are defensive ends.
And Foskey is not one of them.
Foskey is not one of them. No. Now, that doesn't mean that Foskey won't be a top pick, because again, this is Mel Kiper. This isn't NFL teams. But when you look at the edge players coming out, I mean, it's a loaded draft class. And I just it's going to be hard to see him come. I mean, you're talking about Myjai Sanders is down to like on Mel Kiper's board, down to like 8th on the draft on the senior edge players for, I mean, it's a loaded draft class. Now, again, when I say ends, I should probably say edge players, because that's how the draft looks at it. So like David Ajabo is considered an edge player, not an end, because he's an outside linebacker in a 3-4 kind of thing. Well, that's what some people are going to view Isaiah Foskey as well. Some people view him as an end. The point is there's a lot of edge players. Now he has, and so by example, Mel Kiper has Isaiah Foskey listed as an outside linebacker. He's got him as the number 6 outside linebacker in this draft class. That's not high enough for and here's the thing about Isaiah. He's a true junior.
Correct.
So this isn't like him deciding to come back as a 5th-year senior. So I think he should come back for 2 reasons. One, his game still needs work. He still needs to advance his pass. He dominated this year because he's just way better than the people he matches up against, right? He's just really talented. His repertoire needs work. He needs to nuance his moves. He needs to work on the spin move. He needs to work on his double inside move. He needs to work on his hands. Now, it got better as the year went on. His hand play got better as the year went on, but so many times he just either had a speed rush, or he would just kind of do that inside arm, just bull a guy back and then come off and make a tackle or a sack, I mean, which is phenomenal, but he needs a lot of work. Now, he also got a lot better at the end of the year in run defense, a lot better, but that's another part of his game that needs some work. So his game needs to improve. This isn't just like
overall.
Like if Kyron wanted to come back to improve his stock, he could, but I don't know if he would, but his game doesn't really need a lot of work. Kyle Hamilton's game doesn't really need any work. Isaiah's game needs work. And that's the scary thing is if he comes back and he really dedicates himself to continue working on his craft, he's got a chance to be a top 10 pick. Because all the hype that we're hearing about Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo and all that kind of stuff, I have no doubt that Isaiah Foskey can be every bit of that next season.
Yeah,
because the numbers are already there. And then next year, he's going to get some money games to have a chance to go prove himself. So he's a guy that I think should come back. Will he come back? Right now, he's on the fence, in my opinion.
I think it'll be interesting to see what because I'm sure he's going to submit his name, to be evaluated by the NFL. Be interested to see what he gets back. If he gets a mid-round grade, do you think he'll get a mid-round grade? Like,
I think he'll get a second-round grade.
A second-round grade. But yeah, his potential is top half of the first round. And that's a big, big financial difference than the second round. Just is. And you're right. Top to bottom, his grade needs to be. It's not like he needs to just work on this one finesse move.
Right.
You could do that in camp at the NFL, right? I mean, that's not where he's at. Now, could he be very successful and grow and learn while in the NFL? Sure he could. But if you're trying to
first 5-year contract, because look, here's the deal. Yeah,
exactly.
If he's as good as people think, the NFL team's going to secure that 5th-year option if he's in the first round.
Right.
And if he's a second-round pick, he only has to be there for 4, and he'll get another deal. But that first 4 years is not, and it's not guaranteed you're going to be successful enough to get to your second contract.
And injuries and everything else.
So he's in a situation where it's like a lot of these guys, like so Kyron Williams, I just don't see him improving his stock a lot. When you're into that situation, go now. Don't risk. Exactly. There's too much at stake.
Exactly.
Kyle Hamilton can go from 6 to 1, maybe. Like there's no more room to go up there.
And with Jared Patterson, he's in a situation. Kyle Hamilton's in a situation where, depending on where he goes 1 to 5, just depends on need of the team. Needs of teams and all that different stuff.
Because the point is, there's nowhere to go with his draft stock.
Right, exactly.
With Jarrett Patterson and Isaiah Foskey, and the next guy we're going to talk about, Jason Adamil, I think there's room for big jumps from where they are right now. And I think the 2 defensive linemen, and I start finishing up on Isaiah, he needs another year. The production doesn't necessarily need a big jump, but the game there's room for the game to get better. And next year's edge class will be good. Will Anderson's going to be coming out next year for Alabama. He can't come out this year. He's just a true sophomore. But I look at next year's board and I'm like, I don't know if there's going to be 2 better edge players in the country next year than Will Anderson and Isaiah Foskey.
Right.
Now, if there's 2 great edge players, they can both go top 5.
Exactly.
Because here's the thing: it's a pass driven league. That also applies for teams looking for pass rushers. So. Because he's a true junior, I think he should come back. I think he needs to come back. Will he come back? I don't know. Jason Adamil is the next one, Vince.
This one's very interesting to me because I think
he was as good as gone midway through the season.
Okay, yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's what we were hearing starting off, that he was good as gone when things were starting to roll with the season. And he's kind of had a change of heart.
But it's not just that.
But go ahead.
It's not just that. It's for whatever reason he's not getting the love from NFL scouts that he needs to. I've talked to people that work for different bowl games. I've talked to a buddy of mine who works in the scouting industry, talks to people, and for whatever reason he hasn't gotten the buzz. Now, here's the thing: as more and more teams start looking at his film, I think his stock is going to rise. And I think ultimately he would end up being a day 2 pick, like end of day 2 pick, which means 3rd round.
3rd round, yeah.
That would be the ceiling for him right now. But the problem is depending on here's the danger. If you think you're going to be an end of day 2 pick, 3rd round, that may be reason enough for a guy to come out. But if the couple teams that see you there, their draft boards fall a certain way, they may have thought they're going to take you there, but some guy at another position fell, and now they don't take you. Now you fall into round 4 or 5. That happens all the time, especially when you get into like rounds 3, 4, and 5, because teams start, their board starts getting all jacked up. Somebody reached on another guy. Some certain guys fall.
Right.
They thought they were going to be able to get this position early. They didn't get it, so they panic and they go for the. NFL teams panic too. I mean, we see it all the time. So. He's a guy that, for me, I think right now is really torn on it. I think he should come back. I think Jason Adamil needs to come back. And here's a couple reasons for that. Number one, I think he can continue to get bigger and stronger. Not a lot bigger, but he put on good weight this year. He kept that weight on. He was more explosive. I think there's another 5 pounds for him to kind of get and play at. I think his game doesn't necessarily need work, but I think his production needs to get better. I think he needs – his big thing for me, for Jason, this next offseason is, dude, your hand play at the line of scrimmage is awesome. I mean, he's just beating guys consistently. He held up much better at the point of attack this year. He wasn't getting knocked back like he did at times last year. He was much stronger at the point of attack. And I think that his ability to penetrate and be disruptive all took a jump this year as he played more. And here's the other thing. He stayed healthy all season. That's one of the concerns people had about Jason because he'd gotten hurt each of the first 2 years. He stayed healthy from the standpoint of he didn't miss games. Now, like every football player in the country, he has bumps and bruises and things that, are going to need to get worked on in the offseason, but he stayed healthy. And so I see it as it's a situation where if he comes back, he can continue to grow as a leader, which I think is going to help him because he needs those because he's never going to be 6'5", 295, sure. Right? He's always going to be on the shorter side. He's long, but he's always going to be on the shorter side. He's never going to be 300 pounds. He's never going to be that guy. So he has to then overcome that with other traits, right? Great hand play, being very powerful hands for an undersized guy. That's what I think a lot of teams are going to see. Like, yeah, he's only 280, but he's got real strong hands. Teams are going to see his first step quickness is really, really good. But I think that his just another intangible of the leadership, he really, from what I'm told, especially when Kyle Hamilton went out, is that Jason really started to emerge as a leader on this defense. And there was a period of time when Kurt Hinish was out, Myron was out, you know what I mean? And he kind of stepped into that void. Yeah. I think next year he can fill it even more. Maybe not so captain, I don't care about that, but just a leadership standpoint. But his production needs to get better. That's the big thing for me. Yeah. And it is, I think, because as disruptive as he was this year, Vince, his numbers should have been better. And they weren't not better because he was forcing guys into a bunch of other sacks that he was doing that. He finished second on the team in tackles for loss with 7, and he had 3.5 sacks. Now, that's good production for a defensive tackle. But if you think of all the times he had missed sacks this year or missed opportunities in the backfield this year, his numbers could take a big Sheldon Day type jump next year. And I really think they can.
I will also say that if Isaiah Foskey comes back, he's going to be – look, Isaiah Foskey is going to get the headlines, right, because he's an edge rusher, and that's just the way things go. And so he's going to get a lot of attention by offensive lines, et cetera. And I think Jason can really do a great job of capitalizing on the fact that other guys might be getting some more attention, and he's going to be able to dominate in the middle. I just – there's only so many guys you can double, right? I mean, there's only so many. And I think that Jason could definitely benefit from that, and I think his numbers can skyrocket.
Right. I think that he could have a 12-plus tackle for loss, 5-plus sack season next year if he comes back.
Yeah.
There's no question. And he's going to be stronger and he's going to be better. So I think he should come back. Will he come back? I feel a lot better about that now than I did a month ago.
Yeah.
A lot better about that now. So, and I think there's not a lot I can say right now. I'm hoping to be able to say it down the road, but I think the manner in which the coaching staff on defense has conducted themselves with him is going to help their case to keep him.
Absolutely.
And I think that communication wasn't always there in the past. It's part of the change we've seen at Notre Dame recently. So I think Jason needs to come back, and I don't know what he will do. That's his decision. I think the bowl game could have an impact. I mean, if he goes out there and has like 3 sacks in the bowl game, that may be like, you know what, like I'm strike while the iron's hot. But I think right now, if I had to bet, I'd bet on him leaving, but I would not bet much on it, right? Like I'd put like a 5 spot on it, Vince. That's really it, you know? And when I mean 5 spot, I'm talking like a nickel, you know what I mean? Like a $5 bet on it. That's
like a wooden nickel.
Yeah, I'm not talking about 500 or 5 G's. I'm talking like $5 on it, right? Like here's my Abe Lincoln, and that's all I'm comfortable putting on it. But but a month ago, I would have said he's out. He's gone.
Yeah.
He's gone.
So let's talk about MTA, Myron Tagovailoa Amosa. Very interesting for him because he obviously was an inside player. Then this year he moves to defensive end. So, does he need another year at defensive end? I mean, he's shown he's very versatile. I thought he was successful. I personally thought he would be more successful this year than he was. But what do you think?
I thought he's pretty good this year, to be honest with you. I thought for the job they asked him to do, they asked him to be an edge setter, and he was a really good edge setter. I think that there was a couple bang-ups that he had this year that kind of maybe took a little bit of that edge rushing away, that I thought he showed some really good ability there early in the year. I mean, he had 3 tackles for loss in the first 6 games and only had 2 in the final 6 games.
Yeah.
And he was banged up a little bit, didn't play against Virginia had the sickness and things like that. But I actually he wasn't even on my radar 2 weeks ago or a month ago, somebody who may come back. I mean,
right.
5th-year senior and all that,
right.
But apparently he's thinking about it.
Interesting.
And Notre Dame would take him back from what I'm told.
I would think that they would.
Yeah. And I look at it, Vince, I think because he's not an inside guy. He has no future in the NFL as an inside guy. At best, a 3-4 end at best.
Right.
He just doesn't have that big frame. If he's going to have a chance to be successful in the NFL, it's going to be as an edge player. And right now, I just don't think he has the production, or the film to really convince people that, hey, I'm an NFL guy that you should take on, somewhere above the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah.
I think if he comes back, he may not improve his stock, but he's going to definitely have a master's degree from the University of Notre Dame. And I think he would be able to improve his game. And I think this was a rough year for him. He had some injuries. He lost his father. There's a lot of distractions for him this year. And I wonder if he's feeling like another year could allow me to really take my game to another level.
So what you're telling me is there's a possibility that 3/4 of the starting line is going to come back next year.
Yeah, because Kurt Hinish is gone.
He doesn't have any more. He's already a doctor. He can't come back. He's been at Notre Dame for a really long time.
Right.
But
lots of people go to school for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors.
That's one of the best lines ever.
It
by the
really
way.
is. If you don't know, that's a Tommy Boy reference.
Yeah.
If you didn't know that, you need to go watch Tommy Boy.
That's great. That's one of the best lines ever. But yeah, I mean, if you'd have told me at the beginning of the year that 3 out of the 4 of these guys could come back, I'd have told
you they were all leaving. I mean, Foskey would be the only one we'd be talking about. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So this has all the makings of being a very special group again, because the depth is still there too. So,
and we didn't talk about this, Vince. So I love your comment. That right there is part of the discussion for all of them.
Absolutely.
From what I understand is,
I hope so.
We all come back. Because their defensive line was pretty freaking good this year.
Yeah.
The only guy they're going to lose from to graduation, and that's not a cryptic comment. I don't know if anyone's going to transfer. I don't know if anyone's going to transfer. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to say the only guy they're going to lose, because we don't know what's going to happen after the season. Right. The only guy that they're going to lose is that we know of is Kurt Hinish. He's the only one that can't come back.
Right.
Everyone else in the defensive line can come back.
Right.
And the fact that they only have 3 D linemen committed in the 2022 class means that there's not a lot of guys you got to push out. And, you also lost Devon Powell from last year, who was, recruited as an edge player. When they recruited him, that took up an edge scholarship.
Sure.
He transferred in the spring. So I could see a scenario where at least 2 of them come back. If I had to bet right now, I'd bet that at least 2 of them come back. But a month ago, if you'd have said all 3 are going to come back, I said, dude, you're being a fanboy. You're being a homer. Right. There's no way. I wouldn't have said that to your face. Wow. But I think now there's a legitimate opportunity that all 3 of them come back. Now, again, I'm not betting the house on it at all.
Sure.
So I'm just being honest. But from what I'm talking to, from people I talk to, they're all 3 considering coming back.
Crazy.
And so the question for the Notre Dame staff is because they're not surefire first-round picks, there's a much better case to make for all of them to convince them to come back for their personal and team goals.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the pitch from Notre Dame, I'll bet you.
No doubt. So, and having Marcus Freeman as the head coach doesn't hurt this scenario in any way.
It doesn't at all.
Guys.
And and here's the thing: if Mike Elson's not coming back, there's no way they all 3 come back.
Right. Exactly.
No way.
Exactly.
So that was a huge coup for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. And Yeah, some stories there. I hope I'm able to tell them this offseason, but we'll see.
Yeah.
So that's the defensive guys.
We
There's
got one more guy. Yeah.
Yep. There's one more guy as far as the NFL. Now we're going to talk about some potential 5th and 6th year guys here in a second. These are more guys that are making NFL draft decisions. The other one is Kevin Austin.
Right.
Now, we have kind of said for a while now that we didn't think Kevin Austin was going to come back. If he had a good year, he was going to leave. And he's had a pretty good year. Not a great year, but a pretty good year, especially for a guy that's never played. And then he's got the bowl game. So there's still a chance he's going to leave. But I'm told from a source today that there's a chance that, barring some team convincing him he's a first-round pick, there's a chance now he can come back.
I hope he does.
Yeah,
because
he needs to.
He needs to from a not necessarily from a production standpoint, but
Vince, he has 42 catches for 783 yards. He needs to come back from
he's a 1,000-yard receiver, in my opinion. So he needs to come back. And he needs, but there's things that he can polish up. Like his route running can be better.
There's a ton he can polish up.
His placement when the ball is in the air.
He was good this year because he's really talented, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only reason he produced this year. His technique's a hot mess.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to work with that kid for a summer because I'm like, man, if I could work with that kid for a summer, there's nobody guarding him next year. Right. It's just how I feel. Right. And if Notre Dame's able to get somebody that can work with him, whether it's keeping Dell Alexander and hiring a GA that knows how to coach receivers, or hopefully moving on from Dell Alexander, I don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
But if Marcus Freeman's serious about hiring guys can really coach and can really recruit, then Dell Alexander has to go because one of those things is debatable. The second of those things is a no-brainer. He can't do it or won't do it, and that's the relentless recruiter aspect of it.
Yeah.
So if they're able to bring in a good receivers coach to work with Kevin Austin, and now he has experience.
Yes, exactly. Because look,
his game could explode.
Essentially a first-year player,
right?
Okay.
Well,
I mean, he's a
second. I mean, he was in the rotation as a freshman in 2018.
We've argued about this for sure,
but he played a whole year in 2018. He was part of the rotation all year that year. He only caught 5 passes, but he played. Right. He played.
Right. But yeah, this is a completely different situation, though. I mean, completely different. So,
but you can't say a guy's a first-year player who's played multiple years.
See, I feel like
he's a first-year starter.
While guys were getting a breather. Like I wouldn't even consider him a rotation player.
But that's still playing.
Can you check out how many snaps he got that year?
It was about 100. Yeah, I could find it, but it was about 100. I mean, he played. Yeah, remember they threw him 2 balls against Michigan. Remember, they tried to get him deep balls early against Michigan. He was part of the rotation against Navy. Remember, he caught that crossing route on like the first series of the game against Navy, took it 35 yards. So, but that he was just give guys a breather. That's just how they do it. I mean, that's just
hate. But
the point is that he played, right? So, I mean, I just feel like we need to be accurate with what it was. Now, what you could argue, Vince, is you could say because he missed 2 whole years in between that cheapens that experience. Not cheapens the experience he did have as a freshman in 2018.
But it puts distance between the experience and where he's at now.
Exactly. It's not a fresh experience. Right. You could argue that.
That's an agreed.
But I think saying he's a first-year player is not. He played 119 snaps as a freshman.
That's very surprising to me. That it just is. Just based on
because he just wasn't targeted a whole lot, but he still played.
Right.
That's the thing. And that's in 11 games. So he averaged 10 snaps a game. So that's good. I mean, that's for what Notre Dame does with freshman receivers.
It's 10 more.
That's a crap load.
Oh yeah. If we're comparing, you're right. If you're comparing freshmen at Notre Dame, hand him the Heisman Trophy, hand him the Biletnikoff. I mean, shoot. Gotcha. You're muted, brother. Oh my gosh. You're still muted.
It's not blinking. It wasn't blinking.
I don't know.
Told you I need a new mic. The point is, this was his first experience as a guy.
A guy. Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And he needs we could do a whole show on what he needs to work on. Yes. Okay. And that's it's nothing against him. That just means he needs to polish some stuff up. I mean, no question.
Because he didn't play almost all of last year. I mean, that's the thing. He's got hurt was it June or July? Then he was out for a while. He was back for not even a month, working back in there. He only played 2 or 3 games before he got hurt again. and then they were both injuries that kept him off the field. It wasn't like 2019 when he was suspended all year, but he still practiced every day.
Right.
Last year, he just flat out didn't play but maybe a month.
Sure.
So the point is, Kevin Austin's game has a long, like this is because this is the thing you have to think about when we're making draft decisions, right?
Right.
If we're being honest and objective draft people, we have to look at, okay, can he really improve his stock? And just production alone isn't going to take him from 4th round to top 15, right? He needs to be able to improve his game.
Right.
There needs to be things he needs to do. He struggled early in the season against big physical corners.
Yep.
He hasn't played a ton of those since then. The only physical big corners he faced were against USC. He caught 4 passes for 39 yards, and he struggled with 2 drops in that game. You know what I mean? Now, he's played really well since then, but, North Carolina had good corners. He had 3 catches for 36 yards. One of them was a really impressive touchdown, but not great production. He ripped up Navy. He ripped up Georgia Tech. He ripped up Stanford. They have bad defenses.
Sure.
So the point is that those aren't to take away from how well Kevin played. Kevin played very well. The point is NFL teams are going to look at that and say, I need to see you make a good catch against somebody worth a darn. And next year he'll have that opportunity. And also next year, I mean, you talk about him and Michael Mayer as complements to each other.
Exactly.
They're going to put defenses in a really, really tough bind.
No
and
question.
I think that's the thing that you look at and say, that could make both of them much, much better, to the point where I could see Mayer's going to be a 1st-round pick. I truly believe if Kevin Austin comes back and does what I think he's capable of, I think we could be having a conversation about him being a 1st-round pick next year.
I think
I'm not locking it in there.
Well, because he's got the measurables, right? I mean, he's got the physical attributes already, okay? And I think that's part of it. You can't coach size and speed. And I think he's fast, and I think he's got the size. And then now he just needs to polish up some other stuff. And those things I think can happen pending coaching decisions.
I would even argue it's more than polish. I mean, he just flat out needs to.
I was nuancing that word a little bit.
You were being nice is what you're doing.
You
were being nice.
I was.
Yes, you were being nice.
Fair enough.
Look, but that's the thing is he basically just got by on God-given ability this year.
Correct.
And I mean, that says a lot about his God-given ability.
Yes.
And that's what NFL teams care more about.
Right.
They care more about that than him being a polished route runner. My point is, if he could become a polished route runner and do the God-given ability and go run in the 4.4s, the combine, he's the guy that could be in the conversation for it. Because his length, like when they measure his arms, it's going to be like, what? That's just dumb. Like how long his arms are. And then if he can polish his game up, they're going to like what they see from him. Let's just say that.
I agree.
Let's just say that. So Vince,
go ahead.
You want to? I was going to say. I think you were about to say what I was going to say. Go ahead.
As to say, we have kind of a laundry list of guys who either have a decision to make, or Notre Dame has the decision to make on whether they will return for a 5th/6th year. And as I'm looking at the list in front of me, we are talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
8,
6,
right?
well,
8.
7. But I mean, starters. They're all starters at one point or another in this defense, offense and defense. So, it's going to be this if they all go.
And if you want to get technical, you could say all 8, because just like Tariq Bracy starts in the nickel, George Takas starts in the 12 personnel.
The 12 personnel, exactly.
Right? I mean, they're all very important contributors. And so these are guys that more so they have decisions to make, and also Notre Dame has decisions to make.
Right. Yes.
And so let's just start off on offense, Vince. Let's go receiver.
Okay.
Avery Davis and Braden Lindsey.
Yep. Avery Davis and Braden Lindsey. I think if Avery Davis doesn't get hurt, I think he's gone, because I don't think that he can raise his draft stock enough. I don't think a healthy Avery Davis at the end of the year raises his draft stock enough by coming back the following year to do anything, right? But now that he injured himself, he is not going to have an opportunity to participate in any of the combine stuff, pro day, all of that, where he's the kind of guy that needs that opportunity, and he's not going to get it. And so if he has aspirations of playing in the NFL, which I believe he does. Okay.
And he should.
Unless he's got a job lined up in an accounting firm or whatever, right?
I think he wants to play in the NFL, and I think he is an NFL player.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he could be very productive. And so he needs to come back because he's not going to have those combine, pro day opportunities and things like that. It's not going to raise his stock per se, but he doesn't have that opportunity. So I think he needs to come back, and Notre Dame fans should be ecstatic that that's the case.
Well, and I think the other thing so for Notre Dame, I think it's a no-brainer. You ask Braden, Lindsey, and Avery Davis to come back because you look at your
numbers and
and I guess who we forgot to add is Joe Wilkins Jr.
because he's been out for so long, completely forgot about him.
He needs to be on that conversation too. And before the season, I'd have said, we did say I could see maybe one or two of those guys coming back. Well, I think they all need to come back now because you're in a situation where hopefully you can keep your 3 receivers in this class committed. You're not going to add to it. I would rather bring Joe Wilkins Jr. back for a 5th year and Braden Lindsey back for a 5th year and Avery Davis for a 6th year than go get some transfer portal guy.
Oh my gosh.
Unless it's going to be a transfer portal guy that can really make an impact. Right. And that's just kind of where I am. I think at least you need to bring 2 of them back just from a sheer depth chart standpoint.
It's like you're in my head. I was going to say 2 out of the 3, I would be happy from a numbers standpoint.
That's assuming Kevin Austin also comes back. If Kevin Austin leaves, they need to bring all 3 of those guys back.
Correct.
In my opinion. Now, again, that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you start Joe Wilkins over Deion Colsey if Kevin Austin leaves, but Joe Wilkins Jr. can play at all 3 positions. And as you've said many times, no, he's not a difference maker. He's not a game changer, but he's a guy that can play and help you.
Yes.
Right. And Braden Lindsey,
he's a rotation guy.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I feel like Tommy Rees is finally learning how to use Braden Lindsey. And now it's like, okay, can he build on that?
Yeah.
And then you've got Lorenzo Styles. So you've got Lindsey, you've got Styles, you've got Avery Davis. That trio would hopefully be part of a 3-man reputation. And so to me, I think those guys all coming back would be really good for this receiving core, and it would allow them to focus on recruiting 2023 receivers as opposed to transfer guys. That's what I would prefer to see them do, and instead of the portal. Now, there's some guys out there. A lot of people talking about Julian Fleming because he was a 5-star recruit. That's why people are talking about Julian Fleming. But the reality is he hasn't done anything in Ohio State, so we don't know if he's a good player or not. He hasn't done anything. He may end up being a great player. I don't know, and because part of the thing is, with Ohio State, good players are sitting on the bench at Ohio State. Jamison Williams is Alabama's leading receiver this year. He caught 9 passes last year for Ohio State, and that's why he left because he was getting passed up. And now look what he's doing at Alabama, right? So it could be a situation where Julius Fleming only played 7 games, caught 51 passes and a touchdown. Big time 5-star player, right? Pennsylvania guy. Would make sense that he'd be interested in Notre Dame. It's just I don't know what he can do, right? I know what these other guys can do.
Exactly.
Now, if he has interest in Notre Dame and he's willing to compete for a spot and you feel like he gives you more upside than a Joe Wilkins, okay, cool. Go look at him. But I don't think automatically like a guy's a great pickup in the transfer portal just because he was ranked as a high school player. Because if he was playing like a 5-star Ohio State, he wouldn't be leaving because they're going to lose their best receivers next year. They'd be begging him to stay.
Exactly.
And so I just think that for me, it's just let's see how this plays out, right? Like I don't know if that's one that would necessarily fire me up as much as the guys I know that can play because we've seen them do it at Notre Dame. So I would hope that they'd bring at least 2 of those 3 guys back. I think Avery Davis and Braden Lindsey, if they have professional aspirations, both need to come back. I could also understand if Braden Lindsey looked around and was like, "Hey, there's some schools where I can go be a guy, like the guy."
Yeah.
If he thinks he's the guy
that too. I
would
get that.
I get that because he's not going to be the guy at Notre Dame. He's a complimentary player. We've always said that he's I think they need to use him more and better. But we've always, even before the season, he's not a guy that's going to play 60 snaps. He's a guy that you play 30, 40 snaps and you make sure he gets the ball 5 times a game. If he doesn't get the ball 5 times a game, then you're not doing it right. They got close to that late in the season. So to me, that's what I would do. George Takas is another guy that I'm interested in. Because you got Mayer coming back. Mm-hmm. You got Bauman coming back. You got Kane Barong coming back from an injury. So that's 3. And then you've got 2 freshmen coming in. Right? You've got Holden Stace and you've got I'm sorry, and you got Mitchell Evans. So you got Mayer, Bauman, Evans, and Barong. Plus you have 2 freshmen coming in, Eli Raridan and Holden Stace. I don't know if by just in an 85 scholarship football team, you can justify having 7 tight ends.
Right.
So unless somebody transfers, I just don't know if they can. I think they'd love to have George Takas back. I think George Takas is a good football player. If I'm George Takas, though, I'm going somewhere else to where I can just kind of be the guy.
And that's the thing. I think for him, look, you're not going to be the guy behind Michael Mayer, and you're not going to be here for a year after he's gone, right? So I think for him, I think it makes the most sense to grad transfer someplace else and be the number 1 tight end. Maybe a Big Ten school, somewhere along those lines, or somebody that's willing to get the tight end the football, that kind of thing. I would not, if I was in his camp, I would not hesitate to tell him that. Be like, look, man, you got your Notre Dame degree. You did great things at Notre Dame. But, man, why don't you go be the guy?
Right.
Go be the guy someplace. So I'm not saying go to the NFL.
Because otherwise he's going to be with Brock Wright
team. Right.
Yeah. Because Brock Wright just called a touchdown in the NFL yesterday. Brock Wright's with the Lions. He was an undrafted free agent because he never got a chance to show himself in Notre Dame.
Exactly.
And
look,
you and I said
could be that guy.
Vince, and you and I said for all last year and in past years that Brock Wright's a dude on a lot of teams. We said that. And now look at him. He's in the NFL doing things.
Exactly.
Right? Because he was buried on a deep depth chart.
Right. Exactly.
Tommy Tremble's doing things. Notre Dame's 2 and 3 tight ends last year are playing in the NFL right now. Right. Well, so George, do you want to take a chance of coming back for another year and being an undrafted free agent? Then hopefully you can be productive and catch on with a team, or do you want to go somewhere where you can catch 40 balls and prove your stock? But at the end of the day, it may not matter. I just don't know how numbers wise, because this is the thing you have to think about as a football staff. Notre Dame's coaches would like to bring back all these guys, but you can't. You can't bring them all back. You only have 85 scholarships next year. The whole COVID thing has gone away. Unless I think that was a mistake by the NCAA.
Yeah,
I think they should have slowly walked it back. I think they should have gone like 95 next year, then 90 in 2023, and then back to 85 in 2024. Because otherwise, all these kids that got COVID years, but they've still got 4 years of eligibility left, they're being hindered by that. I think that's a mistake by the NCAA. Hopefully, they rectify that. And if they rectify that, George, we love you. Come back.
Yeah. Right.
But if it's 85 again, I don't know how much you can justify having 7 tight ends on a roster.
No, I get that. And again, I feel like George would be better served being the number 1 someplace for a year. I really do. And again, that's nothing against George. I was singing.
No, that's actually pro
George
season.
Yeah,
that's not
right.
If it was against George, you wouldn't think like, dude, he needs to just come back because he's not going to do anything any better anywhere else. That would be against George.
Yeah,
you're saying, dude, you can start for a lot of teams in college football and be the guy.
And he could take the Brock Wright route and be undrafted free agent.
It just so happens that he spent his whole career in a depth chart that had Cole Kmet first, then Tommy Tremble and Brock Wright, and oh, by the way, Michael Mayer. If it wasn't for those guys, if Michael Mayer, let's just say hypothetically, Michael Mayer got hurt at the beginning of the year, I guarantee you George Takas would have caught 40 balls from Notre Dame this year.
Right, exactly.
Would he have been Michael Mayer? No, he wouldn't have, because Michael Mayer's best tight end in college football.
Right.
Would he have caught 40 plus? Yeah. So I think for his benefit, I think he needs to go and be the guy somewhere. I think for Notre Dame's benefit, I just think that it would be good for him to do that.
Right.
Because number one, it'll convince kids, hey, stay, see it out, get your degree, and then you can go do what George did if it works out that way. But also, I just don't think they can justify having 7 scholarship tight ends.
No, I agree.
So unless 1 or 2, I mean, 6 is a tough sell for me.
Yeah.
But 7 is just too many. And then the last one's Josh Lugg, Vince.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. I think based on what Notre Dame has coming through the pipeline, and also based on the fact that they are going to get a new offensive line coach, I think that I give Josh Lugg a big handshake and a huge hug, and I say thanks for what you gave to the university, but I think it's time to move forward. That's the conversation I would personally have with Josh. Whether he goes and transfers and does something as a 5th or 6th year, okay, that's fine.
It'd be a 6th year, yeah.
But for me at Notre Dame, that's what I would do. I just think there's too much young talent here at Notre Dame at the tackle position that's as good as, or has the ability to be as good as in 22 that Josh Lugg would be coming back. Mm-hmm. And again, it's nothing against Josh. It's just is what it is, man. That's how college football is. I like Josh too. But I'm ready to front of the new wave.
Josh is a great kid too.
Yes.
When I say I like Josh, I'm not even talking about him as a player. I'm really not. I'm talking about him as a young man. I really like Josh. But the problem is in football, sometimes you have to make decisions that aren't personal. It's you got to look out what's best for your entire football team.
Right.
And the reality is I think Josh kind of is what he is. And part of the reason I believe that is because of the injuries he's had to deal with. I mean, he's battled a lot of injuries, and they've been like a back and shoulder and things that you don't ever necessarily fully come back from. And so for me, when I look at him, I say, all those things, he is who he is.
Right.
60-year seniors usually don't make huge jumps in their game, even with coaching, maybe being a bit of an issue. So I look at it and I say, I just kind of feel like it's time for him to move on. And I think, like you said, I think your point about with the new O-line coach and bringing in a, coach up Tosh Baker, coach up Joe Walt, coach up Blake Fisher.
What we've seen from some of these young guys is very promising, right? I mean, it's very promising. And I still feel like if Tosh Baker gets coached up properly, he's going to be a really good tackle, right? And if you've got Alt and you've got Baker at tackle, and then that gives you, moves that you can do other places with
Blake Fisher.
Thank you.
And if Tosh isn't ready, then Blake Fisher and Joe Walt need to be your tackles. Because let's be honest, Joe Walt played better than Josh Lugg did for a good chunk of the end of the season.
Yeah, he did.
And just especially in pass pro. And I think that's the direction where he wants to go. Yeah.
And I tell you what, I think that the emergence of Joe Alt makes this decision a lot easier for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think it really does. And so, we'll see what happens.
Defensively, Vince, Drew White, I don't know what they're going to do there. I don't know. That's a tough one too. Great kid. I just feel like fifth-year senior, injury history. It's younger players coming along.
Yeah.
I would love to see Bo Bauer and J.D. Bertrand get a chance to battle at Mike next year with Marist and Prince Colley playing Will. I feel like Drew's a phenomenal young man. He's a better player than he's often given credit for.
Yep.
But I feel like between his limitations and how that limits what Marcus Freeman likes to do defensively, I think Notre Dame needs to make the decision that it's best that he either go play in the National Football League if he wants to try, go transfer somewhere else, or maybe
I think
use that Notre Dame degree.
Again, I think that's a discussion that probably takes place. You know what I mean? Because again, there's only 85. And so you're going to have to make hard decisions. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, right? So, I'm going to have to roll through the rest of the guys. Unless you want to go deeper.
We'll get through them quickly, and then I'm going to go through the super chats when you go.
All right.
I think Tariq Bracey's a guy that I would say the same thing about, is unless he just finishes really strong, I feel like it's time to let's give Ryan Barnes and let's give Chance Tucker and let's give the incoming freshman a chance to because I think they fit what Marcus Freeman wants a lot more, longer corners. And Tariq did some really nice things this year, but I just don't know if there's another level for him to take his game.
Right.
And I think numbers-wise, it would make sense to move on. Safety is the interesting one, Vince.
Yeah, because it's a numbers game a little bit.
I could see a path now where both come back, DJ Brown and Houston Griffith. I think Houston is probably going to come back. I think DJ probably will come back. The question is, if they're asked, I think they'll both come back if asked. The question is, do you ask both of them?
Yeah.
And for me, I think you probably have to pick one of them.
Yeah.
Because now you've got Watts at safety. You've got Ramon Henderson at safety. You've got Justin Walters. You've got Kerry G. The problem is, though, is if you miss out on Xavier Nwankpa, which they will, then you don't really have a lot there. And you may be forced to take them both back. It's just about scholarship numbers for me.
Well, that's a really good point. And I also I wonder what they're going to do with Clarence Lewis, because we've talked a lot about maybe his better fit is at safety, right?
Right.
And so if they're going to move him to safety, that might bump one of these guys out. But again, that's speculation on our part. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but something that has to be
and it's going to be depend on how the freshman corners and the incoming freshman corners both do this offseason. That's
absolutely.
That's going to be the question. So I could see a scenario where both of those guys come back. And I think, and a lot of them too, hey, how do you feel about Kerry G and Justin Walters being guys that push for time next year?
Yeah.
Are you really ready to roll with Xavier and Ramon Henderson and not having veterans behind them?
Sure.
I mean, I think you need to at least bring one back.
Yeah.
And I could see I'm much more clear path to both of them coming back than I would have said a month ago, partly because I think DJ got better as the season went on.
He did.
Houston was solid all year, had a really bad game late. He just kind of was just there. You wonder if he's got it. Maybe he can improve in year 2. I don't know, but it's almost like you need the depth. You need the depth. There's a lot of uncertain depth there. So we'll see how that one goes. So Vince, you get out of here. Appreciate it. And then I'm going to go ahead and roll through some super chats here and answer some of these questions because we got a lot of really good ones in here. So we're going to keep rolling here. And I know we had some questions, some of them about the topic and some of them about other topics. So we'll get to all those things. But I appreciate oh, yes. Here we go. DMND13. I hope Brian is allowed to name the defensive player that he's surprised might be staying because he teased us with that yesterday. Honestly, what we're talking about was Myron Tagovailoa-Mosa. I heard he was gone. And I just didn't even think about the fact he wasn't even considering coming back for a 6th year. But then I heard that he was maybe thinking about it. But then as a couple days ago, I heard that that's what he's leaning towards doing. And I think he might actually do. So that's who I was talking about yesterday. Okay, here we go. Kevin Carter has 2 of them in a row here. So he says, Kevin says, worth noting, if you haven't seen Chris Zorch's podcast with former players' reactions to the Freeman hire, it was very informative about how Kelly wouldn't let former players and the current players and how Freeman was adamant how that must change. Yeah, I've heard that. Well, I didn't even tell you. Oscar McBride was on the show explaining that. I mean, there wasn't a lot of embracing of the past. That's exactly what we talked about. Brian Kelly did not embrace Notre Dame. Brian Kelly embraced Brian Kelly and what Notre Dame could do for Brian Kelly, not the other way around. And I think Marcus Freeman has a completely different look on it, which is why one of the many reasons I felt he should have been the pick for Notre Dame as head coach, because I think he truly gets it. Tristan Mai says would be huge if Foskey stays. Thank you for the super chat, Tristan, and you are correct. Joseph Barrett with a question said, Brian, thank you, Joseph. Greg Mack referred to Georgia's defensive game plan as arrogant. Would you decipher that comment? Yeah, what he's saying is, and we talked about this on Saturday night, what he's saying is basically Georgia just kind of thought they could go out and do what they do. They thought they were just going to line up, run the same game plan they have all year, dominate Alabama up front, and just keep doing what they were doing. There was they didn't grasp about themselves what we've been saying about them all year, which is they have flaws that nobody could exploit on the schedule. They weren't good enough to exploit. Bama was good enough to exploit some of those flaws. Now, I didn't think that Bama's offensive line would play as well as it did because they hadn't played well at all in November. But Georgia just lined up and did what they did. And then the other part of it is because they were so arrogant with it that I think that had a part in the fact that they had nothing to go to when it didn't work. I don't think they had like this, well, hey, because a good game plan, and Vince can attest to this on a show down the road, but when you're an offensive coordinator, you always have to have in your back pocket, well, what if this doesn't work? You have to have what do we go to? What if they kind of stop what we're doing? We have to know what our emergency kind of thing is and have prepared for that. Same defensively. What if they're just ripping up our coverages? We got to have some adjustments to make. What if their pass pro is really good? We have to have some blitzes we can dial up. They had nothing to go to. They had no, hey, this isn't working. Let's go to this. And I think that's what he's referring to as the arrogance, is they thought they just could line up and beat Alabama up. Whereas Alabama schemed for success against Georgia. And that's why I kind of made a joke on Twitter that night that, about the similarities between Kirby Smart and Brian Kelly, because they're just the arrogance of, we're just going to kind of go out and do what we do, where Alabama, who has the best roster in the country, is scheming for success. And that's why one coach has a championship and those other 2 coaches don't and lose big games almost every time they play them. Patrick Barnes. Okay, we answered that one. So, well, for people who didn't see it, Patrick Barnes asked, and thanks again for the super chat, is Jeff Quinn leaving for us, or is Marcus Freeman making staff changes? Either way, that's great news. Thanks for another great podcast while I work. You are welcome, Patrick. But for people who didn't see that earlier, Jeff Quinn, from what we are told from sources, will not be coming back to Notre Dame, and that is going to be that is a decision. That is a staff decision situation. He won't be coming back. Dustin Whitman's with a super chat. Thank you. Says donated to say that Brian Kelly is in South Bend today. Buddy works at South Bend Airport and he got in town earlier. Also has Reese's employee card because he left it in the jet. That doesn't surprise me because right now, I mean, he should be on the road recruiting. Maybe he's stopping by on his way to go recruiting, but he's not coaching for the bowl game. And I would imagine that he's got a lot to do. I mean, he's got to move. He's got a house to get packed. He's got probably bank accounts to close out and get transferred over. And there's probably a lot of things that you need to be in person for. So I would imagine that he'll be back a couple times, in my opinion. But he should be on the road recruiting. Patrick Fitzgerald with a super chat. Thank you, Patrick. Is there any position or specific player you would look to the transfer portal for? Well, Patrick, this is a good question. Part of it's going to determine by a lot of what we discussed today. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made by players and by coaches and by the coaching staff about who comes back. So, for example, if you look at your safety position and you've got Houston and DJ Brown and you say, look, numbers-wise, we need to bring them back, but so you think about bringing them back, but then you look at the transfer portal and there's a couple kids out there that you think could be an upgrade. Then, yeah, okay, I'd consider doing that. I would consider going that route and maybe only bringing one of those two guys back. I think if there's a cornerback that can come in and just, bam, lock down a spot, if there's another Caleb Evans like we looked at last year, like we talked about last year that Notre Dame was looking at, then I would say, yeah, look at a guy like that. I would not look at quarterback. I would not look at running back unless you have a guy leave. Like, I'm much more comfortable in him staying now than I was a couple weeks ago. But let's say Logan Diggs leaves, and I don't think he will now, or at least I hope he doesn't now, and I'm hearing that he's leaning towards staying. Then I don't think running back's a position you look at. But let's say he leaves. Well, then you may need to consider looking at running back at that point in time. Not a given, but you consider it. Receivers one that if you lose a lot of these 5th and 6th year guys, if Austin leaves and Lindsey leaves and either or Davis or Wilkins leaves, then you're just, because of poor recruiting in the past, because of poor development and relationship building by Dell Alexander in the past, your roster's a mess right now. And so when you look at that, you say you may have to go to the portal for that direction. Defensive line, if Foskey and Myron come back, I don't think you need to worry about defensive end. But if they leave, that Viper position looks a little bit shaky now. Maybe there's some guys in the portal that you think could fit that system. So those to me are the positions I would look at for portal guys. And then, of course, if there's an injury or a surprise departure that you're not prepared, that you weren't prepared for, because there's some names in the portal now. There will be some more names that jump into portal in the winter and spring that you need to be prepared for. So there's no need to reach for anybody anywhere right now. I think as the roster develops, you get into the winter and the spring, that's when I think you'll see Notre Dame more active in the transfer portal process. It's a very good question. Jim DeMattis. Thank you, Jim. Unless it's Mateus. I'm not sure which one it is, Jim. Hopefully I get that right. Jim, I would say Jim D. Mateus. Great show. I got to the show, so this may be a little off topic. Have there been any more decommits? Notre Dame has not had any more decommits. I believe it was Tom Loy that reported from 247 Sports that Notre Dame is going to have an in-home visit this week with Devon Moore in an attempt to get him back in the fold. That would be a positive development. According to my sources, they're feeling a lot better about keeping C.J. Williams in the class than they did a week or two ago. It sounds like there's some really positive momentum there. Beyond that, I don't think there's any concern about decommitments that I'm aware of or that anyone's told me. Savage Cyan Fitness, Spencer Rattler. He's a head case, but I don't know what you're asking. I would not look at him. No, I absolutely would not. There's only one Oklahoma quarterback that I would look at. Like, really, there's only one quarterback. Look, I just want to see what Tyler Buckner can do, and I want to see Drew Pine battle for the job. I'm higher on both of those than it would appear a lot of people in the chat are, which is fine. But if Caleb Williams wanted to come, I'd look at him. He's not coming, right? But Spencer Rattler, to me, does not move the needle at all. At all. And we have a couple more super chats down here I want to get to before we get out of here. Matt, 2011 GT, thoughts on Polian following Colonel Sanders to LSU. That would be Brian Kelly. I didn't say Colonel Sanders. That was in the chat for those listening on podcast. I'm okay with a fresh recruiting perspective that aligns with Freeman's. I am fine with Brian Polian leaving. I think Brian Polian was a solid special teams coach. I thought the job he did in 2019 was very good. I thought in 2020 they were really good in coverage, not great in returns. This year they were just kind of everywhere. I don't personally care much for Brian Polian. I think he's an overrated recruiter. I don't think that he is someone that I would particularly care to have as part of the program if I was in Marcus Freeman's shoes. Now, will Marcus Freeman feel that way? I don't know. But reports are today that he is going to leave for LSU. I was told earlier in the week, Tim Priester reported it, that he was going to take the head coaching job at Lafayette College. Sounds like instead he's chosen to go with Brian Kelly to LSU. That's a win for Notre Dame. That frees up a spot where you can hire another coach, in my opinion, maybe someone that can actually coach a position, somebody that the special teams players will get along with more. I'll be honest with you, Brian Polian was not well liked by players on the special teams. I'll tell you what, I'll have some. If we're gonna, so I'll just put this out there. I'm gonna be going to the bowl game. Vince is gonna go. Vince and I are both flying down for the Fiesta Bowl. Vince is gonna cover the game. I'm just gonna be there with my dad. So like nice little Christmas present for my dad. I'm looking forward to that. And my nephew, which I'm really excited about. So I'm flying them down there, and we're going to go to the game together. We're going to do a get-together either Thursday night or Friday night, kind of find a place to where we can all hang out and have food and stuff like that. And anyone that shows up to that, I'll have some stories about. These are things that really can't be put into a story or out publicly, but I'll have some interesting stories about Brian Polian to share with some people during those. Dale Hatem. Dale, thank you for the super chat. Vince, great question in the press conference yesterday. You have a professional sounding voice, great coverage and coaching change, guys. You're welcome. I will pass this note along to Vince. But yes, Vince definitely has a very good professional voice. That's why WSBT has him do a lot of things. He does color for high school football games. He's done a lot of things where that, and that's part of the reason I like him on the show. I think he brings a really professional sounding voice. Plus his knowledge is really good. And he's a friend. And so there's really no downside to it other than the background is not always great. But I had a crappy background for a long time too. And we're working on that. So, all right. Mace AK, I'm not pulling that comment up, but that is phenomenal. I love that. You are the man. I appreciate that. So that's going to be it for today's show. I appreciate. Okay, here we go. Savage Science Fitness says, Brian, that means thoughts, which you gave me. Also, feel free to use my real name, which is Matt. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. But yes, I kind of gave my thoughts on that. So I want to just go up here just to make sure that I addressed it. Find your super chat here. Yeah, Spencer Rattler. Yeah, I wouldn't go there. So. All right, so that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I appreciate you. We're kind of back on a normal schedule now. We'll be back tomorrow again at 12:30 Eastern time. We will have some comments and we got to figure out what our topic's going to be. We haven't quite decided that yet. Hey, another super chat just came in from Will Claw. Thank you for that, Will. If Jarrett comes back, should we move Zeke to center? Yeah, I think he's already been moved to center. I think he should stay at center. I don't know if Zeke just didn't look comfortable at guard. But look, when a new coach comes in, and they're going to have a new line coach, I think it's kind of all bets are off. I mean, it's just we're going to look and, the new coach is going to have to say, we're going to look and see, look, there's no returning starters really. Obviously, Jarrett will end up being one. But let's find where everybody fits and who fits the best and who should play where and all those type of things. So thank you for that very, very much. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Got another super chat coming in. Boy, you guys are wanting to get those in. Are you guys doing anything like you did for Thanksgiving for Christmas? Would love to donate again. So, Michael, that is a great question because what's happening is we were not able to spend all the money that you all raised for Thanksgiving. We literally met every need that we could find. I spent a whole week where my production on the site stunk because I just was calling people. There was a lot of people I talked to that had kind of already got their need met for Thanksgiving that said, hey, we would love to be able to do it for Christmas. And so I've gotten the blessing of a lot of people to be able to kind of switch their Thanksgiving donation over to Christmas. So I just got something yesterday where it was like a huge order for chicken and beef and some hot dogs for a church that feeds the homeless or feeds the community. So I'm going to meet that, going to work that out. I'm going to get that done this week. I'm supposed to meet this week the Boys and Girls Club. They're going to see what their needs are. There's a few other places. So we're going to transition what we have left over to Christmas. And that is going to, I think, kind of eliminate the need for us to do another fundraiser. And next year, I'll do a much better job next year of making sure we have more advanced work to make sure that the community knows what we're doing and that they can count on us to step up and provide that need. So I think the mistake I made this year was just kind of waiting a little bit too long, but it just kind of hit me a little late. And so we'll do a much better job of planning next year because you all stepped up in amazing fashion. We spent more than I thought we would raise. So like I had worked out enough to spend a couple $1,000s, and we obviously spent way more than that already and have way more to spend. So thank you for that, Michael. I appreciate that very, very much. And Matt, 2011 GT, the last super chat I'm going to pull up. Have a great day with the family. So thank you for that very, very much. So hit the like button, hit the notification bell, subscribe to irishbreakdown.com. You can see it down there below, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check that out. We've had a lot of people buying merch from the merch store. You can see a link to that below. Some good Christmas presents if you want to tell your wife. We've added some new stuff. I got some Irish Breakdown sweatpants right here, which you all can see, which I'm really fired up about. They're really comfortable. I'm going to be adding this week the Let It Play Out shirts. And I've got another design that I made is an IB Nation. So I have like the logo right here on a t-shirt and it says Nation underneath. So IB Nation, really like that, working on that. And so we'll have some new merch up on the store here by the weekend. So if you looking for Christmas presents, you want to send the link to your missus, or if you're a missus that would like to, to get some IB gear, maybe have your hubby get you some stuff, or your significant other, or your parents, whoever, wherever you are in life. So check out the merch, Irish Breakdown merch store. So have an awesome day yesterday. It's been a great, great week, fun week, long week. And we're just getting started. We're not going away. So we'll talk to you all very, very soon.